Hey guys, Dr. Ashley here. So, how do you take a Sabbath as a busy Christian? So, if you are someone who is in grad school or medicine or has a busy schedule and is trying to figure out how to incorporate this in your life, stay tuned. We'll talk about it. So, we've been talking about my story. Dr. Ashley here. I'm a general pediatrician. I right after I finished med school, I got bacterial meningitis. I was hospitalized for several weeks and then pulled off work for several months. So I had to get cognitive testing before I could go back to work. And one of the big issues was I could not get paid during that time. So I actually gave up all of my vacation time for the rest of the year so that I could get a paycheck. So when I did finally get cleared to go back to work, I was going to work for the next 10 months straight with no break. So Sabbath was something that was high on my list, whether it made sense or not. It made sense to me. So, if we go back to the very beginning of the story of creation, I think that's where we get the idea of the Sabbath. So, you have all of these other groups where essentially they're saying, all these other cultures that essentially say there was a bunch of gods sitting around and they were doing nothing. And then something bad happened and they had to get up and kind of go fix it. And that's where work came from. But the thing that we see with the Bible story is that's not how work comes into be at all. So basically, God is complete. He has Jesus, He has the Holy Spirit, He has heaven, He has everything He needs. But He decides that He wants to have us as well. So He creates this whole world and everything in it. And then at the end of the week, on the seventh day, He rests. So why does God rest on the seventh day? He's not tired, He's not bored, He doesn't need rest. But the reason God rested is that He wanted to enjoy what He had created. So I love this concept. One way I think about it is I have a friend who is a director. We were in a movie. I was an extra, and so we have all of our friends come over, and we ate dinner and hung out and watched the premiere of the movie. Why? Because we wanted them to enjoy what we had created and what we had put our time in, and we got to enjoy it all together. So I think that's a great example of what the Sabbath should be like. But when we're thinking about a Sabbath, I mean, most of the time, this is not classically how people think of it, right? The classic idea is you take one day off every week on Sunday, no matter what, unless you're Jewish, and then it's Saturday or whatever. So Sunday every week, and then you kind of like what, sit around and play the harp and listen to classical music or something. Oh, wait, that's heaven. But either way, I'm being facetious. But we have this classical idea of just sit around and rest, do nothing. But again, if we were thinking about this the way that God did it, He was enjoying what He had created. So that doesn't necessarily mean just lay around and do nothing. So the way that I did a Sabbath in college and in med school was I actually took a night off on Thursday nights. That was the most reasonable thing to do with my schedule. I was a bit of a perfectionist, but I needed time to study. So I took Thursday night off and I would invite friends over for dinner. Why? Because most of the week I was sitting in my room by myself studying like a crazy person. And I was not enjoying the fruits of the fellowship and the fun and the food that God had really called me to enjoy. So basically, I would incorporate whatever part of my life was kind of missing in my regular day. And that would become a regular night every Thursday night that I would celebrate. And in that way. Now, obviously, every Thursday night, sometimes there was birthday parties or a huge exam I couldn't afford to get out of or whatever. But I basically incorporated God's plan of how could I enjoy the world and what I've been given, and how could I enjoy the fruits of what I've been working for. So, is a Sabbath part of your life, and what does it look like? If you've got an idea of a Sabbath that's a little bit different, I would love to hear your comments and kind of hear how you incorporate it below. So, the problem here was I thought I had a good thing going with the Sabbath, and that's kind of what I tried to do when I started working again, except obviously Thursday night would change. Sometimes I would have to be on call Thursday night. And just a side note, I think sometimes I've heard of people who have in residency basically requested a certain day off, saying this is the day I have to have off for religious reasons. That was not something I did, and that's not because I don't consider myself a devout person or Christian. But essentially, I said, look, I am in your world right now. This is the sacrifice I'm making for the next 3 years. And I promised I would do all that I can to learn and to be here as you demand. So essentially, I did not request a certain day off every week, but I would incorporate a day off whenever I could. And that was just um, to be aware and to be cognizant of the people that God had given me to learn from and the bosses that He had put over me. So, but then of course I get sick, right? And so here's the problem. If the idea of the Sabbath is that you're enjoying the fruits of what you've created, right? You're enjoying all of the things the work that you just put in, and then you're not working. What exactly are you supposed to be doing for Sabbath? Do you even need it anymore? Do I just throw it out entirely? So this was really interesting. So I had to completely redesign the way that I thought of a Sabbath. And one of the things that I had to do was break down a bunch of lies I was believing about it. So one lie being, I am what I do, right? I've only been a doctor for a few days, but somehow it's become a part of my identity. And I really had to lay that down because I wasn't even sure at this point if I was going to be able to go back into medicine at all. Second, I had to break down the religiosity, the rules that we set, and also just the idea of like, I am working for God. He's called me here. I got to go serve at my church. I got to go do these things. We get these ideas in our head, but really, God does not need us, right? Like I've had friends who get saved by just literally a dream. Like nobody else is involved in it. They just have a dream and suddenly they wake up a Christian, right? Like God does not really need us. He lets us to help him, and he lets us do incredible things with him. But to be fair, he doesn't need us working like a dog to do so. So I had to let go of those thoughts and really redefine who am I, how I defined myself. So I had to sacrifice my pride, everything in me that says, no, they need me. I got to go do something. I got to go fix something. In reality, people need God. They don't necessarily need me. They need His love. They need His support. They need His power. And so I had to lay that down. I had to sacrifice myself, let go of that title doctor. If you know me in real life, I do not ask people to call me doctor unless I'm seeing you as a patient. And the reason is from the very get-go, from that very first week, I had to lay that title down and make my identity not stand on that because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it again or not. And I had to really re-embrace the concept of who I was. And instead of saying I am a doctor, I said I am God's. And what that meant was I am God's child, I am God's chosen, I am God's love. And that's what I had to stand on. And so, really, what I was doing during my Sabbath when I wasn't working was I had to get that season, I had to really just get in God's presence. So I did a lot of like worship, a lot of Bible study, some one on one Bible studies. And I really just had to get out of my head. That was the main thing. I had to remind myself of the truth and not of my own fears about my career and about myself. So one book I love, if you're trying to look into this more, The Art of Rest by Adam Mabry is a pastor in our church that is a workaholic and does a really good job of kind of breaking down how you can think about a Sabbath and kind of some examples of what it can look like in your own life. And if you're in a place, sorry, I love this line. He says, anxiety is what unbelief feels like. And I think that is the main thing the main place I would start if you are trying to work on incorporating a Sabbath. What is giving you the most anxiety? And how can you kind of lay that down for God and say, for just this one night, this is how I'm going to give God my time, my energy, my thoughts, and incorporate it kind of that way. So if you've got any other ideas, share them below. And we're going to keep talking about just different things that are important for leadership at work. So if you'd like some more tips on that, kind of practical things, how to do things, practical tips on how to do things, just join. Just go down to my website and I will get some handouts sent to you. All right, have a good one. Bye.